Hello everyone, it's Word Up here, and I'm here to talk to you today about the Legion artifacts. So I was expecting to do this video as soon as the Shaman went live on Alpha, but since we never got that, I've decided to push it forward and just go through what we know so far about each of the artifact traits, how they're going to affect us, and so on. Now please bear in mind this is a very rough and ready Alpha video, so there are quite a few things that we don't know, and there are a few traits I can't really talk about because we don't know anything specifically about yet. We're going to touch on some of the spell effects that may not be quite as clear to some people, that I've seen quite a lot of disconnect on the forums and so on. Talk about a quick dip into the Maelstrom power stuff that we know so far, the stat values, the way that the spec may be playing, and I've also got a quick glimpse of the spreadsheet that I've been using to sort of justify where I'm coming from with this, but I won't be going too deep into it. So let's go straight into the artifact itself. And we'll go right at the bottom with the active ability, which is Doomwinds. Now, what we know so far about Doomwinds is that it's a low cooldown burst, really strong, probably one of the best artifact traits so far. That's a 6-second window of you doing a massive amount of Wind Furies if we take it at face value that literally everything, main hand, offhand, strikes, so Storm Strike is 2, Wind Fury procs, and they're all doing 200% extra damage. And in that period as well, you're also going to be completely flooded with Maelstrom. Now, there is a bit of a problem with the gameplay, in that so far what we can see is we have no way of meeting that surge of Maelstrom with our expenditure. So we're just going to be sort of at 100 Maelstrom for that whole period until it goes away, and then it'll slowly bleed away again, which is a bit of a shame. We could use a talent that amps up the amount that we can spend, perhaps akin to, say, the Carnage talent that Fury Warriors now have. But even still, it's a really good trait, and it's one that I'm happy to have. Now, moving on, we're going to Gathering Storms. This is a AoE talent, in effect, that increases our Storm Strike damage for each target that's hit by Crash Lightning. Now, currently, there's something I'm going to explain later on in the video regarding Crash Lightning, so it's not as good as it first appears. It's a pretty average at best talent from what it seems, but it does at least affect the AoE in some way, in a AoEing filters into your single target. So, at least it's got an effect. Gathering the Maelstrom is a Maelstrom generation type trait. It's going to give Rockbiter a small chance to generate extra Maelstrom, though with relics that could become a really high chance. And it's going to give you surges of Maelstrom that you're able to use. So it has potential, but for now it's just a pretty standard stock resource related trait. Spiritual Healing is very poor for what it is. We shouldn't be spending a great deal of Maelstrom on Healing Surge, and even if we do, the amount that it increases it by is so minor that this is absolutely going to be the last trait that you're going to be spending points on, unless there's some sort of force limit on us getting it earlier. Spirit of the Maelstrom, this could go two ways. If it is while in combat or in Ghost Wolf, so while in combat we generate that Maelstrom, then it'll be really good. It's free Maelstrom. It's about equal to the Rockbiter talent in Maelstrom Gen, but constantly ticking and passive. Whilst if it does require you to be in Ghost Wolf, then it will be virtually worthless because we cannot afford to sit in Ghost Wolf to generate Maelstrom at all. And lastly, on this section, we have Wind Strikes. This is a double dip attack speed steroid. When we gain Storm Fury, we're going to gain 10% attack speed, which is going to, in turn, increase the amount of attack speed do, which can generate more Storm Furies, which is going to increase the attack speed more. So we've got a double dip sync with the way that activates. Now, 10% attack speed isn't wonderful. It's nothing amazing, but it is still a relatively interesting talent that has potential, especially with the relic system, to become quite strong. Now, I'm going to leave the 1 out of 1 capped traits to last and just go down the remainder of the 3 out of 3s. So we've got Hammer of Storms. This is just a really standard, basic Storm Strike damage increased. That's about as much as you can say. The same with Forged of Lava, that's just for Lava Lash, and Surge of the Elements, which is just for your elemental enhancements or abilities. Now last is Fueled by Rage, which is our defensive trait. Now this adds a heal to your Shamanistic Rage. I personally don't like it. I think that baking more into a single defensive is quite weak, especially if it doesn't increase the defensive capabilities. What it's relying on is that we will need to heal after we take the hit, or we'll need to heal before. It's an unusual and quite clunky way of dealing with the trait compared to other classes that just get a flat damage reduction, or they get a flat increase on the amount of DR that their personal cooldown gives. So I'm not a fan, but it might be interesting. Now, we go straight into the single traits. Storm Flurry is the big one that everyone has been talking about. It's basically a return of back-to-back Wind Furies tied to your Storm Strike attack. Now, it is a really good talent based on what I've seen from the math side of it. It is a really solid increase to your damage on Storm Strike. It has potential interactions, especially with, say, Doom Winds. It has potential negative interactions with Storm Fury, where the subsequent procs when you use Storm Strike could consume a Storm Fury that it generates. But that remains to be seen before we see it on Alpha, as whether or not that actually exists. Hurricane is really good as well. That's a big buff to how strong Mastery is. That makes Storm Fury procs really valuable because you're going to be doing even more damage with that Storm Strike when it goes off. And it also has potential synergy with Tempest in the talent tree, which is an extra 50% damage when you use a Storm Fury generated Storm Strike. Whether or not it applies to both charges will again need to be tested, but that's an interesting possibility. Alpha Wolf is increase to your AoE via Feral Spirits, allowing them to attack an AoE. Whether this is valuable or not is completely up in the air as to whether or not Feral Spirit actually deals reasonable damage. So that, again, is not something that can be said definitive, but it is an interesting possibility. All three of our major traits, so that is Doom Wolves, Unleash Doom, and to a lesser extent Doom Vortex, we don't really have any information on, so we can't comment on very definitively. Doom Vortex has got some damage tied to it in some tooltips, but we don't know the frequency of the damage dealt, how strong it will be. So at the moment, reserve judgment on all of the major traits until we can actually see any of them in action or we get some more fleshed out tooltips. Now, a quick look at one of the most important things that I wanted to touch on is Crash Lightning, that has been some disconnect with. Now, a lot of people have been under the impression, now myself included when I first heard it, that when that is active, it's going to be dealing 75% of the spell cast in the area. Now, when you look at the tooltip here, this 75% of weapon damage, that implies that it is not, say, a 75% strength Storm Strike in the area. That is just 75% of your weapon damage in the area, which is significantly weaker. We're talking 10% of the strength, slightly above, which is an important thing to notice. Now, that, again, we really need to see this on the alpha, but if that actually is the case, then our AoE is going to be noticeably weaker than anyone was really expecting. Lastly, I'm going to take a quick look just at the Maelstrom power generation and spent expenditure. At the moment, we are generating Maelstrom at a reasonable pace based on what we know so far, but the expenditure, however, is very static. So when we have the spikes with Doom Winds, again, in this spreadsheet, it's not currently modelled, but when we have those spikes through Doom Winds, we're not going to be able to spend any more or any extra to force it out of our system. So we end up just capping, which is really a really negative system when we want to make the most out of it. When those Doom Winds are up, therefore, we basically spike to 100 very quickly, and if there's any procs of Storm Fury in that period, then as soon as that happens, we will immediately cap, and we will do nothing. We'll be able to do nothing to get rid of it. In terms of stat values, what we're currently seeing at the moment is that Mastery is the king of secondaries. Haste is pretty far behind, and Crit isn't that far off what Haste is as well. Mastery is just way too much in one single package. It's increasing all of your elemental damage, and it's increasing your chance to generate Storm Furies, and it's increasing your Maelstrom gen by Wind Fury. Having so much baked into one stat, very dangerous. That's, say, Shadow Priest situation in Warlords, where everything was just tied into that. So that's going to have a knock-on effect. If Mastery is that much stronger, then Haste is weaker, and the only real speed that we have is tied to our global cooldowns coming in Legion, and we will want Haste less, so our global cooldown will rise, and you'll be able to press less buttons, have less active spells outside of, say, your big cooldowns like Feral Spirit's Haste buff. At the moment, it's very unusual what we have on paper, but we are really waiting on Shaman to come into Alpha, so I'll do my best to keep you updated. It's been quite a bit since I did a Shaman related video since we got into the Alpha, but I was really waiting on the Shaman to get activated before I did any more. But I'll make sure that I keep it a bit more consistent in the future. And I do hope that you enjoyed this. If you have any questions about the artifact or anything else that I've been looking at, you can drop them in the comments below. And please subscribe if you want to be kept up to date on the enhancement stuff that I'm doing. And thank you for watching.